Yair Rodriguez versus Brian Ortega has to be one of the most exciting fights that the UFC recently announced, and absolutely nobody is talking about it. A few days ago, Dana White took to Instagram to announce some fights. Among those fights was Brian Ortega versus Yair Rodriguez.
February 24th in Mexico City. You already know Moreno versus Albazi is on the card. We are adding number 3 ranked Brian Ortega versus number 2 ranked Yair Rodriguez. Moreno and Albazi is the main event, but do not fear. That fight is so badass that Ortega versus Rodriguez is a 5-round co-main event.
Besides the currently scheduled bout between Alexander Volkanovski and Ilia Topuria, this is probably one of the most exciting fights that the featherweight division has lined up at this current moment in time. Everybody is talking about UFC drama and UFC 300 predictions, Twitter beef. We're not going to talk about that in this video. We'll talk about it another day. Both Brian Ortega and Yair Rodriguez have fought before. Yair actually winded up beating Brian Ortega in their last fight, but that's because Brian Ortega suffered a shoulder injury during that fight, and it was that shoulder injury that put Brian Ortega out for almost 8 months. And now that Brian Ortega is finally healthy again, he will get to rematch Yair Rodriguez. The first fight between Rodriguez and Ortega was actually fairly competitive. I remember I was extremely disappointed when the fight ended in injury, because I was super excited to watch that fight. Yair and Ortega are some of my favorite fighters. I actually had the honor of meeting Brian Ortega one time at the UFC International Fight Week Expo, and I could tell you he is a really nice dude. And I'm super excited to actually watch this fight again between Rodriguez and Ortega, because I finally get to see how it would all play out. Rodriguez versus Ortega is going to be an absolute banger. Say what you want about either fighter, the one thing that you cannot say is that they are boring fighters. However, I also thought Derek Lewis and Francis Ngannou was going to turn out to be an absolute banger, but we all know how that turned out.
Walked into this building and watched the heavyweight disasters from the beginning. Nagano's a piece of shit. Miocic's a piece of shit.
Yair Rodriguez is currently ranked number 2 in the featherweight division, and Brian Ortega is currently ranked number 3 in the featherweight division. But somehow Arnold Allen is also ranked number 3. So yeah? Keep in mind, I do think they do this for fighters sometimes when they get injured, where they're allowed to keep their place in the rankings. I think this is really something that's nice. I know some people may not like it, because to take something away from an athlete they worked their whole life for, that number by their name, just because they got injured, something that is beyond their control, isn't that fair. And as long as they're not holding up the division and somebody else could have that same ranking, I really don't see a problem with it. But what do you guys think? Yair and Brian are both absolute phenomenal fighters. And every time you fight, you know it's going to be an absolute show, whether they win or whether they lose. Rodriguez is a very exciting fighter, and he has the highlight reel to go with it.
Are they going to throw another big shot? Oh, nice body kick. One more flurry. Oh!
I mean, just look at this dude's record and who he's fought. Starting all the way back in 2014, he has a win over Leonardo Morales, a win over Charles Rosa, a win over Dan Hooker, a win over Andre Fili, a win over Alex Caceres, a win over BJ Penn, a loss to Frankie Edgar, a win over Chan Sung Jung, a no contest to Jeremy Stevens, then a win over Jeremy Stevens, a loss to Max Holloway, a win over Brian Ortega, where Brian hurt his shoulder, a win over Josh Emmett, and a loss to Alexander Volkanovski. The only 2 people he has lost to recently are Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway, but to be honest, everybody loses to those 2 dudes. Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski serve up losses like McDonald's serves up Big Macs to any and everyone. Brian Ortega is also a phenomenal fighter, and he is one of the only men to actually almost be able to finish Alexander Volkanovski in the featherweight division. To this day, I have no clue how Alexander got out of that guillotine, and I don't think I will ever know how he did. And if we go ahead and take a look at Brian Ortega's record, it is similar considering that the only people he really lost to were both Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski. Going all the way back, Mike De La Torre, no contest, Thiago Tavares win, a win over Diego Brando, a win over Clay Guida, a win over Rene Moicano, a win over Cub Swanson, a win over Frankie Edgar, a win over Chan Sung Jung, obviously that loss to Max Holloway, and a loss to Alexander Volkanovski as well as a loss to Rodriguez, but he hurt his shoulder in that fight, so I really don't count that against him. But then again, I am a little bit biased because I do like Brian Ortega. And I know I said I like both fighters, I just like Brian a tiny bit more. To be honest, I hope we see an improved version of Brian Ortega because he has been almost away for a year and a half. And if Brian Ortega can improve his striking and had much better boxing than he did when he got injured, there is a very real chance he could beat Yair, and there's a very real chance he could fight for a title again in the near future. And to be honest, with Rodriguez ranked number 2 and Ortega ranked number 3, whoever wins this fight might set themselves up for a title shot, or be one more fight away from a title shot. I'm absolutely hyped for this fight. One of my favorite fighters, Brian Ortega, is returning to fight another one of my favorite fighters in Yair Rodriguez. So yeah, I definitely think this fight is being overlooked. I think it is going to be an absolute show from beginning to end. And I think it is absolutely tragic that this fight is being overlooked, because I think this fight is going to be really, really good. This fight is criminally underrated, and I hope it gets the attention it deserves. What do you guys think? Are you excited for this fight? Does it not interest you? Let me know in the comment section below. If you did enjoy the video, also please be sure to drop a like, comment, and subscribe, as it really does help the channel grow. Keep in mind, I'm still working on improving my videos a little bit at a time, and I promise you over time the videos will get better. If you have any ideas on how I can improve my videos, let me know as well. If you have any ideas for future videos or things you want to see me talk about, put those down below as well, as it really does help me. Anyways, I love all of you. Peace out, have a good one, and I'll see you next time.